Okay, hello. I have started reading This Is How You Lose the Time War. I read this previously, but one of the book clubs I'm on Discord started reading it, and I thought that would be a good reason to get started again. So this time around, I have a physical copy. I think last time I mostly listened to an audiobook and had an ebook, so it was a little different. This time I fell in love with it pretty quickly the last time I read it. So I know I like this book, but I didn't pay a lot of attention. I definitely missed a lot of things. So I'm pretty excited to be reading it again. So this time around, I am marking it up. So I've already started doing quite a bit here. I thought it would be kind of fun to start talking about it right now because I'm only 22 pages in, and I haven't really decided on a tabbing method. When I own a book, I am less likely to do any kind of tabbing because I can just mark it in the book. I can highlight, I'm actually thinking I might go through with colored pencils at some point to mark this up more thoroughly. But yeah, so let me kind of talk about what I have started with. If you're not familiar with this book, it's been extremely popular. There was a whole thing on Twitter with the guy who had something about balls in his name, where he absolutely loved the book. And I think it is kind of comic booky. It is sort of video gamey. I don't think that it's like high literature, but it is a lot of fun. It's very pretty. Just the way it's written, the images that it produces in your mind, which is something I want to talk about because there was actually a line in here about that. So I definitely like this book, but I think this is one where it's like, if you don't like it, I'm not gonna think less of you. Like, I won't judge your opinion. There's a lot of books where I definitely would judge you for not liking it. And wonder about your taste for not liking something. This one, I think I would a little bit, but I get it. I think that there is a certain element of preference when it comes to whether or not you're going to like this book. And it has that, it's because of that video game quality. I think it is sci-fi. It's very sci-fi. And the way that it messes with language, I think, is kind of juvenile in some ways. So I would not hold it against someone. But all right, so let's kind of talk about what I'm doing when I read. So I guess spoiler alerts, because I'm going to go in a lot of detail here. So this is kind of what I do when I'm reading. I have read this book before, but it was a couple of years ago. I don't have a lot of memory about what happens. So I do know that the two main characters fall in love, so that's a spoiler alert for sure. But I think it's pretty obvious from the beginning here that that's what's going on. Now that I'm reading it again, I see that. So yeah, like the syntax here, so that's something that I bring up a lot. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know that oxymoron is the right word here, but crude technology, there's this whole element that happens within here, and I think I wrote about it later on. Let's see, this says sophisticated tech mimics organic life. And then this says versus crude. So crude is the inorganic, and the more high tech is the organic. And I even wrote that here. I worked in produce for a while. So OG means organic. CV is conventional. If you ever work in I think it was only Whole Foods that did that, but still. So silver moss devours steel, and violet flowers choke the dead guns. Like, this is very much like organic matter and time trumps any sort of new technology that uses contemporary and modern production methods. something that requires a lot of processing to create, like steel, right? This is past the Bronze Age, clearly. And I think there was this moment early on where they talked about, let's see. Yeah, I think, well, another thing to note is like the word seeking gets used. That becomes important. The two characters are called seekers and hunters over and over again. And I noticed that from the beginning. When I do like the square thing here, I think that's like basically me highlighting with my circling and stuff. She didn't cause but used. Ah, yeah, see, and here's another of that like organic, the reef to the other's whole, and the two empires. There's this like organic versus more tech-based. And then this says, yeah, organic versus tech. That's what I said right there. So there you go. And then controlled phoenix. I think I wrote that just because like it's rising from the ashes, obviously relating to a phoenix of some kind. But it feels like it's contained and intentional somehow, which is not how phoenixes work. Let's see, what else is worth talking about on this page? For truer form, so like she is a woman, but I think there's many indications here that they're not really human, or they've transcended beyond human, even if they once were, but I don't think it's very clear. Yeah, so each player has their signature. Let's see, what does this say? What they both do to victims. Oh, twisting. That's something I actually kind of started keeping track in the front here of words that are overused. So this is my list so far. So we've got twist, flute, mound, wreck, and then corpse and bones. So I think some of that is just what this book is about, but it's kind of that comic book quality that I was talking about too. I think it comes across in that list of words. Let's see. All right, so do not call it Earth is another one because there is later on. We go, I know there was a spot where it talks about a planet and it's like, oh, this is Earth. And we're like, oh, okay, whatever. Yeah, here we go. Yes, this is Earth. So this is on page 14. We got this. This is Earth. So yeah, magic trick, twisting. There's a lot of things that they do seem very magic oriented because they're using organic matter and time. And I think that's like what we relate magic to a lot of the time is magic and is organic with vines and earth and rot and just time and the degradation of things or the speeding up of organic processes. And that's what all of this is about in this section, which we already kind of talked about. This, I said it was a cool structure. It won't, and neither will they. I liked that. That it won't, and that means the planet, and neither will they is the corpses, which is kind of a cool way to do that. And that's something that I think they do over and over again with language, the two authors of this book. They're sort of like layering it and relating back. It's almost like writing a computer program, I think, where they're keeping track of these lines and using them later, which is clever. I don't know that I don't consider it like very literary, honestly, because it's just kind of a gimmick. And that's something that I complain about a lot when it comes to art and literature is when are we just using a gimmick and when is it something that's like literary or artistically valuable? All right, so let's see, repeat imagery. Yeah, so this is where I was talking about with my list of words that get used too much. So we've got the mounds, wreck, corpse. And if you look at this section where I said repeat imagery, we already got this, right? And I think they know that, like bodies mounded, wreck of ships. So yeah, we have like moons disintegrating overhead. And this is all very like, yeah. So, and then we have like that juxtaposition, right? So if it's organic versus tech, we're seeing that in the setting here too. Like the cream paper is paper is a form of technology, right? It's very rudimentary technology. It's crude technology, but it stands out and it's also like less technological than what's happening around it, right? Let's see, handwriting, personality. Oh yeah, and then burn before reading. Burn after reading. I feel like that's very intertextual because it does relate to a lot of things. And that's something that happens a lot in this book too. Like if we look here on, look on my, like that's Ozymandias, right? Like that's a poem. It's very much reflecting to other literature. And then the other one that I noticed was this one. Dear Red in Tooth and Claw. That's a Tennyson poem. And they do that intentionally. Like they're very much attempting to do that. All right, so I said foreshadowing here. Oh yeah, so like they already know from the beginning of this that like Red is thinking this before she even reads it. She's aware of the dangers of how her people are going to view this. And it is exactly what ends up happening in the end, that they are seen as, well, and they become revolutionaries. So the gauntlet has thrown, like this relationship has already begun before we're walking in, like that's what we were talking about with this right here. Each player has their signature, patterns of audacity and risk. They've never met, but they know each other already before this happens, right? So there's a gauntlet, and this is where their relationship begins. It's very much enemies to lovers. Sorry, my neighbors are being loud. All right, and then mission failed and accomplished at once. I think that's another like oxymoron I should write in there. Braided future, we're getting, I didn't really talk about that, but in this section right here, I mentioned textiles, and that's like a thing that keeps coming up over and over again. So we have lots of organic stuff, glass, that was the ground, so that's a little, like that's not very organic. And then blue is the shadow, red is flowers. I'm kind of trying to figure out like what are the differences between these two characters. I don't think that really worked all that well. Let's see. So maybe does internal. Oh yeah, seeker. She does not weep that anyone can see. I don't know if that's actually doing anything there. I don't think I'm going to read too much into that right now. But long practice arts that no one has followed. Yeah, long. I mean, this is just kind of telling us like who Red is. And I don't know that most of this really matters that much. Oh yeah, Wrinkles Time. That's a reference, I think, to A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, which clearly we're messing around with some of the same concepts in there. If you haven't read Wrinkle in Time, I would highly suggest looking her up because it's worth reading. I don't think the adaptations that have happened would give you the impression that I'm trying to get to from this line, but yeah. And then this is my little like symbol for an important quote. And letter was meant to be read once, then destroyed, but she reads it again. And that I think kind of plays into the question of time and how they're manipulating it, and that they might be manipulating, but they don't really control it, and they lose their grasp on it constantly. So I think that kind of tells us that. And this is the first chapter, right? We're only 6 pages in, so I mean that kind of covered a lot of ground right there. There's a lot going on, and this is the actual letter right here. So we already talked about like this is Ozymandias. It's very intertextual and over-anthologized works of early Strand. Yeah, like over-anthologized. They're playing around. The authors know what they're doing here. It's a joke. It's not really meant to be literary. It is just kind of silly, which I think is what this book is overall. It's not intending to be high literature. Let's see. Yeah, this idea of boredom, that's something that I think I should list up here. I think my little list here, like I need a second list, and I should do like themes. Oh, I don't have a pen with me. I should go get one. Okay, I went and I got a pen. So let's see. So I think in this front section here where I have my list, I am going to go ahead and write like red and blue, boredom, because I think that is important. All right, so let's see, our notions. Oh, no, this is her responding, so we haven't actually finished this. Okay, so bored. Sorry, I think I moved my camera a little bit here. Okay. Flash and dash. So flash is another one I think I should add to this front section. There we go. All right. Because I think flash is kind of an important thematic element too. Like they talk about noticing each other so much and that flashiness that is a part of their personality. Your unstoppable force and movable object. This is kind of, you know, they talk about this a lot. These kinds of like, is more like scientific principles. I think that's important to these two characters. And this is another one where it's like, that's like probably something I should keep track of. Like outcomes determined from the first move. Like it's chess, right? Like they're playing chess, and they respect each other's abilities and skills. Any couple. So this is me, like, I know that eventually this leads to a love story, right? And I think we all kind of know that with this book. Like, if you read about this at all, you kind of know that that's a thing. So, this is, I think, like any kind of romantic relationship, to some extent, this is what's happening. The future we seek to secure at each other's expense. I think that that's a pretty common thing in literature, conflict between two characters who end up together, right? Like we see it in like Much Ado About Nothing in Shakespeare with Benedict and Beatrice. It's something that constantly ends up happening, like at odds with each other, like Kate and I don't remember the guy's name in Taming of the Shrew to some extent too. Sorry, a lot of my references are going to be Shakespeare, but you know. Okay, and then margins. This is just them being kind of like clever with language again, right? But we see this, like there's this respect for each other, this admiration for each other that is already sounds like a love affair. Like it already sounds like they're completely obsessed with each other, which they are, but we see it get even further later on. I love that. Please find my gratitude all around you. Like honestly, I think I might turn that into a image of some kind, because I really like that. Please find my gratitude all around you. Anyway, let's see. Admit them to your memory. You must seek my presence. Like this, it just feels like they're just this is obviously all about love, right? I feel like that's what's happening there. This is just all about love. And I mean, they're also just obsessed with themselves too. There's some narcissism going on here as well. But yeah, the elegance of your work makes this war seem like less of a waste. And I like that they're already talking about like, it is a waste, the war. Yeah, jargon, we're getting more like science, tech stuff. Digested, that's kind of relating to all of this stuff too. I think that is important. Our next victory against your side will have a little piece of you in it. It's just, you know. All right, so I don't know how much I want to savors the victories in retrospect. We're just messing around with time so much here. It's ridiculous. Finesse, brutality. Like, that's another oxymoron kind of a thing going on, right? Let's see. Green heart, forest bisected by borders. It's all very organic, right? I've got an infection. Yeah, and I guess this is kind of interesting, just there. Made by bubbling. What does that mean? Like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. Ugh. All right. Symmetry, recording, and water's randomness. That's a heart right there. I know it looks like a bee, but it's a heart. I love that. That's really very pretty. So yeah, I mean, I think from here we're kind of just rehashing the same things, and then this is Red's response. But we are already seeing like the clever ways that they're leaving these messages behind, right? And like these are taunting messages. They're not necessarily love letters, but they end up being love letters the more you get into it. And I think that they already are kind of like, they're talking so much about how much they appreciate each other's skill. So let me kind of, let's see, what does this say? Prophets do not say things about sunglasses. Okay. No. But yeah, we have crude again. Not every battle is grand, not every weapon fierce. I like that quote too. Let's see, what does this say? For want of a nail. Oh yeah, like that. I mean, we have a lot of like literary references here, and that's one too. For want of a nail. That's definitely a proverb worth looking up if you're not aware of it. Absurd. I think I probably should be writing that more often, because there's definitely a lot of things that are, it's a juxtaposition of things that should not be put together, which is very absurd, very Dada, very like kind of silly. And I guess it's sort of effective, but it is one of the reasons that I think of this as like not high literature. Like, it's just people messing around with language to some extent. So I have seen you laugh, I think. That comes up later on. You were right that I laughed. And then we actually see that again later on. Where did I see it? It was, let's see. You were right that I laughed. You imagined fire, knowing you're fine. I thought I put a little double in it. But yeah, like, they have seen each other laugh. They know each other more intimately than would suggest, because they've never actually met, right? All right, so where did I leave off here? Yeah, so for want of a nail and laugh. I was like, dupes. Burned the summer palace. I rescued what I could. I like this idea that they've been noticing each other's work this whole time. You wormed inside me. Like, this is just so, like, that is very much romance and love, right? And then, let's see. They already know the outcome, but one doing it anyway. But are doing it anyway. So, like, this is that same who's infecting whom. And that goes back to this idea that she already knows the dangers of what she's doing. And that's happening here too. Self-destructive paper. Yeah, I just think it's very interesting. So the first time I read this, I thought they were still enemies when the letters started. This time I think both were already wanting to rebel and were seeking an ally friend for resistance. And I think that is true. I think they're both getting into it. What does this say? Okay, that's hilarious. Oh, horse Trojans. Oh my god, that's so funny. That's pretty good. That's clever. But it is very silly. Labyrinth of bones. So we already talked about bones. I kind of liked this whole concept of these pilgrims, to spawned pilgrims. And then, yeah, this very like scientific element here. moved from supernatural to literally natural theories. And I think that's kind of what they're playing around with a lot in these. Let's see, this says past, present, future all at once. Yeah, that's definitely something that we see a lot in this book. And in that case, you see like will think it possible to have spawned. So future, past, and then of course this is happening in the present, in Red's present, but it is also a past for both her and the war that she's in. So that's kind of interesting. Let's see, another world. Oh, this time it is Earth. This was me trying to figure out what's going on. But I don't think it's not pilgrims in the sense of like pilgrims and Indians. It's pilgrims in the sense of something much earlier in human history. I think like shamanic kind of things, because like what we see later on, there's like, oh, look, twist again. Cathedral, like we have these ideas of these monks. There was, yeah, here we go. Bones of some ancient nun hung by some other, and they're like creating these chandeliers of, didn't I just see that? Chandeliers of bones. Like that's just bonkers. Yeah. Mistresses. Oh, I don't even see it anymore, but like it's to remind themselves of the impermanence of flesh. I like that concept, I think. And yeah, so we do see closer than a lover. I mentioned here, like language of romance often used sets the mood. So like it lets us know that this is a romance between the two characters. There's awe, fury, also a juxtaposition, and it tells us something about the characters. Let's see, what does this say? Want to be caught and chased and teased. Like this is something that they both desire from the other. Like it is already very much like a love story, right? Local fertility deities. I kind of liked this whole passage here where Red is thinking about the people that she's dealing with at this particular moment. And it's interesting that she's like respecting their beliefs even while she doesn't really believe it. Mission failed. Too much time with bones. Yeah, so like Red kind of messed up, but I think if we read this letter, it becomes clear like she had it was never going to be successful. Blue already made it impossible for her. Yeah, I like this invocation to the reader, right? The seeker catches them before they land. Abandoned bones, and like this is us being invested in this, right? Like this letter is what we care about. All right, so I already mentioned the Tennyson poem. Enjoy an asset destroying Grimshaw. Was he cute? Yeah, self-destructing paper trail. Didn't we already talk about that? That came up already. Self-destructive paper trail, yeah. So why do that when we can just dimple futures punch cards? And this is kind of cute. Like, I like that Joy is playing into this war that they're fighting between each other. Yeah, it flatters me to find you so attentive. Like, yeah. So, I mean, I think I'm really enjoying reading it again is kind of what this comes down to. I haven't really decided on my method for what I'm going to do after I write all these notes, but that was it for the first, few chapters here. I don't really know how I'm going to label these, but I think like this is probably like chapter 1, and then that's a letter, so I could say like L1, and then this is chapter 2, and we got L2. I guess we could say this is RL1. That's maybe what we'll do. And then this is chapter 3, and this is BL2. And I think that's kind of how I'll do it. So this is chapter 4. Yeah, so yeah, I guess I'll keep going. I kind of like making these sorts of videos, so I'll probably make another one. I don't know if the publishers are gonna like that I'm putting so much information on the internet, but yeah, I'm just gonna keep going, and maybe I'll be a little bit more polished eventually, but for now, this is as good as we're gonna get. All right, until next time.